TCU cracks the top 25 for the first time this year, and they have a chance to start climbing pretty quickly. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast. Your number one daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, 817 Raised. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. We're going to close out by taking a look at TCU's late resilience and how that could be a defining trait of the team. In segment 2, Rhett Lashlee is the worst kind of sore loser. I understand, but I don't understand. And in segment 1, I am glad to say that I was wrong. TCU is a top 25 team after beating SMU, and I did not necessarily expect that to be the case. Let's get into why I was doubtful, because it wasn't doubtful of the team. It was more so doubtful of the process. I thought that looking at, excuse me, remember I came on the show after week 2 of the college season. So after one game, but TCU had a bye week the following week. So after week 2 of the college season, I looked at SMU losing. I looked at Arizona State losing. I looked at Baylor. I think Baylor had beat SMU. But I looked at how all of the teams on TCU's schedule were ranked and how they were valued. I'm not one of these people who try to come on here and act like I watch every single game that plays. I don't. I don't even love the quadrant that you get to have depending on what you're watching it on. I don't even love that. I really am a one game on the screen type of guy. I've become more versatile or more comfortable having more games on the screen. But all in all, I am a one game on the screen type of guy. But a lot of times people say, oh, they should be 22 or they should be 20. I'm not about to sit here and act like I know every single team that plays in the top 25, especially not the teams that play 20 to 25. I do try to watch more games when TCU isn't playing, but I'm not about to sit here and because someone asked me, why should they be above the 23rd team? I may be at a shortage for words. So I try not to put myself in those positions. Instead, I judge based off what they typically value. And they typically value resume. They typically value your opponents. I think that TCU playing SMU was a good test. I thought it was a really good win, but I didn't necessarily think that the voters would look at it super highly because SMU wasn't a ranked team. So I thought that that would hurt TCU's chances. I think I said this in my first week on the show, but I wanted to give it a little bit of a reflection because, time goes on and maybe that would have been forgotten. But this was something that I didn't necessarily expect, but I think it was the right call. I'm glad to say that I was wrong, not because I'm sitting here rooting for TCU to be in the top 25, but because I think they are deserving of a top 25 slot. I think they are a top 25-esque team. Remember, I don't want to come out here, well, what about this team and this team? There's probably 30 teams you could say deserve a spot in the top 25, and TCU should be one of them. Also, the fact that TCU wasn't high after that North Carolina win, that also stuck out to me. Not because I thought the Tar Heels were some dominant team, but because I thought that there was so much preseason hype around them. There was so much preseason hype around the addition of Bill Belichick that TCU coming in and absolutely just thumping them. That should have been a little bit more respected to me. There was not even a real close argument that the Frogs were in the top 25. But like I said, I was wrong. And I think not only beating SMU, which is another ACC victory, you now have 2 P4 wins. I don't know how many teams can say that in their first 3 matchups. Maybe more can say it now that they played 4 games. But in their first 3 games, TCU has 2 P4 wins, and that is an impressive thing. But not only did you beat a P4 team in SMU, the way that you beat SMU, I believe, was impressive. I think that you came in and looked like a complete team. I think that when you look at the offense, we already knew what the offense was going to be. We already kind of had an idea of this is who Josh Hoover is. But Eric McAlister showing out on that stage. I don't know how many games we're playing at 11 o'clock that were just demanding your attention. If you're going to go with the quadrant that I talked about, and I'm talking about the 4 games on one TV, 3 games on one TV, 2 games on one TV, right? If you're going to go with the split screen approach, TCU was probably in 90% of people's split screen in that 11 o'clock games. Eric McAlister went for a quarter century. Eric McAlister dropped 254 yards, which is the highest total that we've seen from an FBS opponent or FBS player this year. I went and took a look after the game, and I was like, you know what? What is the highest total that any player has reached in 2025? And I went through that. ESPN had their weekly leaders. Not anybody before Eric McAlister had made it to 200, let alone to 250. And he ended this game with 254. So this was a big-time game. It had star power on offense. You had a quarterback that has been heavily hyped, lived up to the hype. You're looking at a wide receiver in Eric McAlister who had a standout performance, looked like an absolute star on a stage where I don't think there was many games that were really stealing from him. And honestly, if you missed the first touchdown, you get the second touchdown. You missed the second touchdown, you get the third touchdown. It wasn't as if McAlister just had one play and that was it. It wasn't as if McAlister had 3 close to the goal line touchdowns. I would argue that every single one of Eric McAlister's touchdowns were highlight-worthy plays. Whether it was Josh Hoover rolling out to his right and throwing a dot over the hand of the SMU defender, and then McAlister having the concentration to not only catch the ball, but then turn up and get into the end zone. Or maybe it was the 70-yard catch and run where he pulled away from SMU defenders. Or maybe it was the fact that he did that again on a shorter field with a 44-yard touchdown where he caught a short route and ran away from SMU defenders. You've seen plays where McAlister showed his hands. He showed his concentration. He showed his strength. He showed his speed. He showed his big play ability. You had all of these things on one stage for TCU, and I don't think that there was a lot of games to really distract from the TCU versus SMU game. These are the type of games that allow voters to see who you are. And on offense, the Frogs have proved themselves to be an explosive bunch. They've proved themselves to be a consistent bunch. And I thought that was on display on Saturday. And it's a big reason why I think you look at them and say, let's put them in the top 25 now. That goes with the 2 P4 wins. But on defense, because it wasn't just the offense, it wasn't just a shootout. On defense, I thought they did a good job corralling Kevin Jennings. I thought that Jennings had a moment where he was getting loose. I thought he had a couple of, big time plays, but I would kind of argue that the majority of Kevin Jennings's good plays were because Jennings is just a really talented quarterback. He's just a really talented quarterback where you throw things at him and his athleticism is a little bit too much. He had some off-platform throws, and then he just has some absolute dots. I'm not going to say that everything was difficult for him, but he had some absolute dots on the day. So Kevin Jennings did get his, but he's also the type of quarterback where him getting his doesn't necessarily negate what your defense is able to do. I still thought the defense had a good day. I still thought the defense did a good job getting after him at points. I thought they did a good job against guys like Romello Brinson. Let's actually look to see how much Brinson had on the day, because it couldn't have been much. It could not have been much as far as yards go. Romello Brinson had 4 catches for 51 yards, and one of which was a 30-yarder. Now, you may be a little bit like, 30 yards, you don't want those. And yeah, you had a couple more big plays than you wanted. I'm looking at the longs, and sometimes the stats don't necessarily reflect what we felt. But TJ Harden had a 30-yard reception. That's catch and run. Jordan Hudson had a 34-yarder. Yamir Knight had a 34-yarder. And Romello Brinson had a 30-yarder. When you go through and you look at 4 30-yard receptions, it does feel a little bit concerning, but at the same time, that's the eye test. I don't think supports that. The eye test, I don't think supports that TCU was allowing a lot of big plays. I thought that they were pretty consistent, and Jennings had a couple of plays, like the one close to the goal line where the defender was right in his face and he just made that pass for the touchdown. Jennings is a good quarterback. He really is. So I don't think there's any shame in him getting some plays, but TCU also held SMU to their lowest point total. That was surprising to me when I heard that in the presser. I said, dang, because you're looking at it, they had 24 points the week before, they had 28, the week before they had 45, and the week before they had 42. So you got to give some kudos to the TCU defense that was really being torn apart going into the game. And I encouraged you, let's not give up on the cornerbacks. I do think it was time to be concerned. It was time to look at the game and say, all right, you have to step up now. And I thought they did. If If the SMU matchup was a moment for you to make a decision on what TCU had in the secondary, this was a big time game to say affirmative or to be affirmative afterwards. This was an affirmative game because you had interceptions, you had big time plays. You had one where the game was still in the balance. They took a shot down the field and it was sticky coverage, right? Like these are the things you were concerned about, but you ended up looking pretty good in that department. And I think the fact that you could say this was a complete win. It wasn't just that TCU beat SMU. It wasn't just that the Frogs have another ACC victory. It was the fact that they looked competent on both sides of the ball. It was about the fact that they looked like they could have a high-profile quarterback, a high-profile wide receiver, in a defense that could stall out a really talented quarterback in Kevin Jennings. They did all of that while a lot of people were watching. This gets you into the top 25. Now, I think, like I said, you could climb. I think you could climb pretty quickly because you look at the next couple of games. Yeah, you have Colorado in 2 weeks, but this Friday you have Arizona State. You win that game, I could see you climbing. I think that the Sun Devil are still a really respected program. They're not top 25, but you do have Iowa State coming up soon. You still have Baylor in just a couple of weeks. You have BYU coming up soon. So you actually have Iowa State and BYU back to back. That's going to be a time where if you walk out of that run and you're still undefeated, you may be approaching a top 15 ranking. Genuinely. I don't think it's difficult. The Big 12 has 4 teams who are ranked, one of which is TCU. That leaves 3 options for them to play, and the Frogs play 2 of the other 3 ranked teams in the conference. If you're able to get through that and you're still unscathed, you're still undefeated, you're looking at the Frogs bumping around, if not crossing that top 15 threshold. But as we move forward, Rhett Lashlee, top 15 sore loser. And I think I'm being generous. Honestly, top 5. One of the worst displays of saltiness that I've seen after a game in a long time. And while I'm not mad because it is a rivalry, it was just rooted in foolishness. So let's get into his comments and why it just didn't make sense as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by The Game Cap. And quick question for all of you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry, maybe you want to go back in time just a couple of days and see the final Iron Skillet for a while, what hat would you be wearing? What hat would you wear? It's sunny. I know it sounds crazy. You would think shirt, you would think maybe even socks, but what hat would you be wearing? Would you be wearing the frog boonie, the boonie hat? I love that one. I used to call it a safari hat. Would you be wearing the retro cap from the 80s and 90s? Right? Like these are the options that you could have, and they're all stylish. See, these aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles that were in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the low price. If you use the code LOCKED ON, you'll get your vintage hat for $16.99. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use the code LOCKED ON for an exclusive discount because the legends wear the game. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12. Drake is going to be breaking down the biggest stories around the conference as well as the 4 teams in the top 25. I got to look. Ain't too many conferences that are going to have more than the Big 12 right now. But anyway, Rhett Lashlee is going out like a sore loser. And I'll tell you what, on one hand, it's a rivalry. So why not go out like a sore loser? You're supposed to. But the problem isn't necessarily that he's a sore loser. It's the words that he's saying in his sore loserdom. I like that. Sore loserdom. It's the thing that he's saying. Listen, the Iron Skillet is over. It's over. And it's not coming back for the foreseeable future. By the time that we see TCU and SMU face off again, unless there's a playoff matchup on the horizon, in the regular season, the battle for the Iron Skillet, the next time we see the Frogs and the Mustangs play against each other, there is a good chance that Rhett Lashlee or Sonny Dykes or both won't be the head coach of their respective universities. There's a legit chance because I just don't think it's coming back anytime soon. Rhett Lashlee has to sit with this L for probably 10, 15 years, maybe forever, that in the last Iron Skillet, he lost. Now, of course, no one's going to go out quietly. Of course, no one's going to end this type of rivalry with no words after. It's not going to be love. Oh, it's the last one. We're just happy that we played, or we're not going to say any goofy stuff like that. We're not doing that. We're going to antagonize the opposing fan base. So on that hand, that's what I mean when I say I understand why Rhett Lashlee is a sore loser. But the things that he said really do bother me. And it's not from a competitive aspect. It's not about never giving anybody any props. I do want to read this entire quote. I want to read this entire quote because it's actually quite disappointing, the words that came from Rhett Lashlee. He says, I'm sure it was a really big deal for them. I'm sure it was a really big deal for them to win this game after what we did to them last year. They were motivated. We put 66 on them. We didn't beat them today. They did. We're 3-3 in the last 6 games we played. They were the ones that chose not to play. And when you lose, you really can't say anything. But I think they know what we're building. I think they know what's coming. There's an insinuation that TCU is scared. And I believe that as a competitor, as a rival, saying things like that is fair game. It's fair game. Rhett Lashlee can say anything he wants about TCU is scared, and he gets that as a loser. It's not going to be taken the same way. Okay, I get it. I think that as a rival, you can bring up last year's game when you lose this year's game. All that is fair game. But what is not fair game is Rhett Lashlee cracking his mouth to say that we're 3-3 in the last 6 times we played. This is a prime example of using factual statements to lie. I'm not letting this slide. Rhett Lashlee has not been at SMU for 6 years. What do you mean? You have not been building this program. If you want to say that TCU is afraid of what you're building, let's focus on what's happened while you were at the helm of the Mustangs. Yes, you put up 66 last year. Yes, big time win by SMU. It's also the only time you've ever won this game in 4 years. It's the only time. You are 1-3. You are not 3-3. I understand that TCU lost the 2 games prior to this 4-game streak that I am unloading. I get it. I am not discounting those 2 games before Rhett Lashlee because I want to make TCU look superior. I'm not discounting those 2 games before Rhett Lashlee got there because I want to make it clear that TCU has dominated this rivalry. I'm not doing those things. I'm not slanting it. But I do believe it's objectively foolish to talk about things that you did before, that the school did before you got there. And then most importantly, who won the 2 games before you got there? Who won the 2 games, right? Like SMU is 3-3. But in the last 4 games, they're 1-3. Who won the 2nd and 3rd victory over the last 6 years? It's Sonny Dykes. It's Sonny Dykes, the head coach of TCU. One of my favorite rap lines to quote is Slick Rick saying, I've been trying to claim things I haven't earned, honest, man. And that's exactly what Rhett Lashlee is guilty of. And I may let it slide on most occasions. I'm not letting it slide today because you can't claim that SMU is 3-3 in the last 6 matchups, which, yes, is a true statement. But you can't claim it because you've only been here for 4. You aren't 3-3. You're 1-3. You have a losing record against this team that you're claiming is scared of you. And if you do want to take those last 6 years, Sonny Dykes is the one who has dominated the series. And who are we talking about you having to beat in this situation where this team is so afraid of you? It's Sonny Dykes. You can't claim victories that your opponent earned. Like that doesn't make sense. And most times that sentence alone doesn't really make sense on the surface. But Sonny Dykes was the SMU head coach before Rhett Lashlee. He won the last 2 games. Sonny Dykes is 5-6. When you're talking about who you're afraid of and who's afraid of you, we have to be come on now. We're going to talk about Square in a minute, and we're going to talk about supporting local businesses. Shout out to my guy Tyler, who has a local business in Fort Worth, a local clothing brand called Rooted in Reality. It's time for Rhett Lashlee to have some statements that are rooted in reality. Instead, he decided to make some statements that were rooted in foolishness. Those statements that were rooted in hate, they're rooted in rivalry and in just intensity. I accept those. Talk about your win last year. It's the only win you can actually talk about. But talk about your win last year. That's the things that you do. Talk about how you embarrassed the team the year before and how they were super motivated and you weren't. Talk about how they're afraid of you because of what you're building. And I don't deny that SMU is building a program. But what I do deny is that Sonny Dykes and the Frogs are afraid of them. I think that's foolish. That's not rooted in reality. That's rooted in ignorance. That's rooted in lies. That's rooted in deceit. And though his statements may have been rooted in fact, they were actually rooted in falsehoods and false equivalencies. Now we push forward and we take a look at the SMU collapse. No, I'm joking. They collapsed against against Baylor. Against TCU, I thought TCU just showed the resilience that defines the team and the fact that they're a big-time squad that rises to the occasion in big-time moments. Let's not even say it was a collapse because I think it was a really good moment by TCU. And calling it a collapse puts all of the weight on SMU. And though that would be fun, I like to be what? Rooted in reality as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Square. Now, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home. Whether it's that local sports bar that's packed on game days. And, you know, when your team doesn't play, you like to go outside and watch games with other people. Or maybe you're a watch with others type of guy or gal. Maybe it's the coffee shop that knows your order by heart and is surprised whenever you decide you want to try something different. What? This isn't what you do. You like your lattes. Or maybe it's the corner deli that has been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. And when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. So make sure that you are supporting local businesses through Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot or your neighborhood clothing brands. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, if you're a new customer, you can get $300 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel right now. Don't wait. Monday Night Football is hours away. If you're not listening to me as soon as I drop it, it may be minutes away. But the thing about FanDuel that's okay is even if you catch it in the middle of the game, right? Say you're not listening and all of a sudden it's 7:30 and you listen. Oh, wow, I forgot that the Ravens were playing. That's okay. You can still go to FanDuel because they allow you to put down bets in the middle of the game. In the middle of the game, before the game, doesn't matter. They have same game parlays. I love it all. I love it all. Make sure that you're going to FanDuel. You can put some money down on the TCU-SMU, or excuse me, the TCU-Arizona State game that's coming up on Friday. Doesn't matter. You have all of these options. Go to FanDuel right now. New customers can get $300 back in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel and make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Making all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Do you like my shirt, YouTube? I'm your papi. Real indicative of where we are today. I realized that, the bottom part is a little bit cut off. I thought you'd be able to see the whole thing. But shout out Eddie Guerrero, RIP the legend, Latino Heat. But yeah, that's how I feel. The last Iron Skillet, and TCU walks out victorious. TCU said, or Sonny Dykes says, we're going to smash it with a sledgehammer. I don't think they're going to do that. But that's how you do trash talk after the game. Sorry. And speaking of comments that were after the game, I love that Josh Hoover and Sonny Dykes are aligned in how they speak. I think that your quarterback and your coach being extensions of each other is a really good way to run a program or to run a team, period. You want the quarterback to echo the sentiments of the coach. You want him to be a coach on the field. And when you listen to how Dykes and Hoover speak about making plays in the fourth quarter, when you talk about one of the things that I heard repeatedly is that's what good teams do. You heard it from Dykes, and then you heard it from Hoover. And I want to talk about what that moment was. And there's a couple of moments you could point to. There's a handful in every game, especially in competitive games. But I thought that the resilience that the Frogs showed in the fourth quarter, it probably stood out more than anything else, if we're going to be honest. This is the quote that Hoover had, we were able to be stronger in the fourth quarter than they were. That's what it's all about. Good teams find ways to win in the fourth quarter. When it mattered most, we dug deep and found a way. Yes, they did. And I want to talk about the moment in which it mattered the most. I want to talk about that moment right now. And TCU was down. They got down randomly in this game. It felt like they had control. It felt like SMU kept jockeying. They kept coming back and forth, but they never really took the lead, or they didn't take the lead until late in the game. So let's look here. In the fourth quarter, you had a Jennings touchdown with 10 minutes left, 10 and a half minutes left in the game, that put SMU up for the first time that day. For the first time that day, SMU had a lead, and it was 24-21. In the drives ensuing, you had a TCU touchdown, only a minute and 12 seconds it took, 75 yards. Then you had a 3-and-out by SMU. Then you had another 75-yard touchdown drive. This one took 2:45. And then you had an interception by Kevin Jennings. Then you had TCU out on downs. And though that sounds like a lackluster way to finish, it was more so them just trying to drip the clock more than anything else. And then you had another interception by SMU. So after the Mustangs took a lead, and this is where I think the resilience come in, and this is where I think it could be a defining moment for the Frog team, not just the offense, because this was a offensive and defensive response. SMU goes up 24-21. It feels like they finally steal some of the momentum that they felt they kept trying to, right? When SMU dropped, when SMU took the lead 24-21, it felt like they finally claimed the momentum that they kept getting close to grabbing. So now you're up 3 points, and you're like, okay, we may be looking at a comeback on the way. TCU responds with a touchdown drive, an explosive play by Eric McAlister, a catch and run for 70 yards. Then they force SMU into a 3-and-out. Quick. Then you look at another touchdown drive of 75 yards. This one features a real punt-esque catch by Eric McAlister where Hoover threw it up, and there was a couple of SMU defenders around. But McAlister had a really big-time day, and this was one of his most underrated plays. But for him to come down with that was a pivotal moment. And he closed out that drive with another catch-and-run touchdown of an explosive play. Then you come back the next drive, you get an interception. And that wasn't the dagger, but it felt like it. And it got it to the point where TCU is up 11 points with 4 minutes left. You're just trying to drip the clock, and you were able to go out on downs, but you took 3 minutes and 13 seconds. So by the time that by the time that SMU got the ball back, there was 57 seconds left in the game, and they were down 11. I would say that was a success. And even though that, you still get an interception on that drive. Jamel Johnson had back-to-back drives with interceptions. Back-to-back drives with interceptions. When SMU came back to try to steal all of the momentum, when SMU came back and finally took a lead in that game that was truly back and forth, yet TCU was winning the majority of the time, TCU leaned up in their seat, they locked in, and they said touchdown, interception, touchdown, interception. Then you drip the clock. Touchdown, 3-and-out, touchdown, interception, drip the clock, interception. That is how you respond. That type of resilience to finally going down in a game that could have easily, it's an emotional game. That's the thing you have to realize. Rivalry games are emotional. And though I think that momentum exists in pretty much every game, I'm a big momentum guy. Momentum exists especially in rivalry games where everybody's going back and forth, and the emotion of it can swing the tide of a game. TCU settled in when they got down. They locked in. They showed resiliency. They showed that even when everything is emotional and intentions are high, they can focus. This was a big-time matchup, and it showcased the mentality of the Frogs. And that's why I think that you should be hoping that this was a defining moment, a defining trait of the team. Not that they would get down and then bounce back, but the fact that they have a strong mental base. And that all starts with the coaching staff, and it starts with the quarterback, who are extensions of each other, not only in theory, but in actuality when it comes to TCU, Sonny Dykes, and Josh Hoover. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk about how TCU's offense actually hit a roadblock, and you should be happy that they hit that roadblock because of how they pushed through it on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.